courtroom was packed, and I mean packed, not just sold-out concert packed, but last lifeboat on the Titanic packed. The pretrial buzz had been a media-feeding frenzy. Cable news panels had spent weeks debating it. Pundits, with their impossibly white teeth and grave expressions, had declared it a slam dunk for Goldberg. One legal analyst on CNN had called Crockett's decision to represent herself an act of professional suicide not seen since that guy who tried to wrestle a bear. Another, on Fox, called it the ultimate David versus Goliath showdown if Goliath had a law degree from Harvard and David was armed with a strongly worded tweet. The consensus was clear. Jasmine Crockett was walking into a slaughterhouse of her own making. Looking around the room, you could see why. On one side sat Whoopi Goldberg, flanked by a legal team that looked like they'd been 3D printed in a Wall Street skyscraper. Their shoes were so polished you could see your own terrified reflection in them. Their suits were so tailored they probably had to be surgically removed at the end of the day. Their air of superiority was so thick, you could practically smell the imported leather and $100 cologne. On the other side sat Jasmine Crockett. Her legal team, still just her, armed not with endless resources, but with a stubborn resolve and what looked like a dangerously high caffeine intake. The charge was defamation. Whoopi demanded $10 million. $10 million, claiming Crockett's comments about federal funding for so-called extremist programming had gone too far. For words, just to put that in perspective, that's enough money to buy a private island, or more realistically, about 4 gallons of gas in California. The tension was sharp enough to cut glass. Everyone expected a routine celebrity lawsuit where star power crushes the opposition. But what unfolded was anything but routine, because the moment the trial began, the spotlight wasn't on the lawyers or the celebrity, it was on the judge. Enter Judge Edward Grayson. His name carried a whisper in D.C. halls, and it was more like the whisper you hear right before a cartoon anvil falls on someone's head. He had a reputation for his sharp tongue, his legendary impatience, and his not-so-secret disdain for conservative figures. This was a man who believed his black robe came with a built-in force field against consequences. Within minutes of the gavel dropping, his colors showed, and they were neon, flashing, seizure-inducing colors. He leaned back in his chair, adjusted his glasses, and smirked like a cat who'd not only found the canary, but had already live-streamed its demise. Before Crockett could even speak, the lead attorney for Goldberg, a man named Bartholomew Sinclair III, rose to give his opening statement. He spoke in a low, theatrical voice, as if he were auditioning for a Shakespeare play. He spoke of the hallowed sanctity of a public reputation, of venomous arrows of slander, and the sacred duty of the court to shield a national treasure from the daggers of reckless discourse. It took him 10 minutes to say what could have been said in 5 seconds. Our client is very famous, and she claims the defendant said mean things about her on television. The jury looked mostly confused. Juror number 7, a retired postal worker, was already starting to doze off. Then it was Crockett's turn. When she stood to introduce herself, Grayson cut her off. He asked mockingly, "Let me guess, you're the defendant and the defense attorney and the paralegal. Are you also catering this thing? Because I could go for a scone." The courtroom chuckled nervously. Crockett didn't flinch. She just stood there and calmly replied, "Jasmine Crockett, Your Honor, representing myself." The judge sneered, "Yes, I see that. I've also seen your credentials. University of Texas School of Law, is it? Is that a real law school or one of those places you get a degree from a cereal box with enough proofs of purchase?" He said it loud enough for the jury to hear. Crockett didn't react. She knew his game wasn't just about bias. It was about throwing her off balance, making her angry so she'd make a mistake. And then, less than 9 minutes in, it happened. Crockett raised a simple objection, stating, "Objection, Your Honor, hearsay." Judge Grayson shot back, "Overruled, and that'll be a $500 fine for courtroom misconduct." Crockett asked, "Misconduct, sir? On what grounds?" The judge declared, "For excessive blinking. It's distracting, pay the clerk." 9 minutes in, and she was already under penalty for using her eyelids. By day 2, the narrative was already written. Jasmine Crockett, outmatched, outgunned, and cornered. But that's the thing about cornered fighters. They're like a raccoon you find in your trash can at 3 a.m. It's got nothing to lose, it's probably sleep-deprived, and it will absolutely fight you for that half-eaten burrito. The next morning, Jasmine rose from her chair, calm and unshaken. She began to teach the court itself, citing legal precedents. She started, "Your Honor, with all due respect, I'd like to remind the Court of Ferretta v. California." The judge interrupted, "Ah yes, California, the state that gave us avocado toast and crippling traffic. What's your point?" Crockett ignored him and continued, citing New York Times v. Sullivan. Grayson cut in again, quipping, "The New York Times. Please, I get more reliable facts from my morning horoscope." He was trying to rattle her, but she was a machine, finishing with Falwell v. Flint, a case protecting even offensive political humor. At this point, Bartholomew Sinclair III, Goldberg's attorney, clearly thought he saw an opening. He stood up dramatically and announced, "Your Honor, the defense speaks of context and political humor. Perhaps it's time the court saw the humor for itself. We would like to present Exhibit A, the broadcast in question." Grayson smirked. "Proceed." A large screen was wheeled out. Sinclair played the clip of Crockett speaking at a press briefing. The clip was short, barely 30 seconds, edited to make her sound aggressive and unhinged. When it ended, Sinclair turned to the jury with a look of profound sadness, as if he just watched a puppy get kicked. But then Crockett stood up. "Your Honor," she said, "I thank my esteemed colleague for presenting this evidence. However, he seems to have cut the clip a bit short. For the sake of full context, which is the cornerstone of any defamation case, could we perhaps play the 2 minutes before that snippet?" Grayson, cornered by procedure, reluctantly agreed. The full clip played. It showed Crockett not on a random tirade, but responding to a direct question from a reporter about a specific government funding bill. Her comments, now in full context, were revealed to be a dry, critical analysis of public policy. The slander was actually a reasoned argument. You could feel the air go out of the prosecution's case. Several jurors picked up their pens and started writing, not just doodling. Sinclair's face went pale. He had just handed Crockett her own best piece of evidence. Grayson, seeing his preferred narrative slipping away, grew furious. He looked at Crockett and barked, "Are you done with your little history lessons and film festival, Ms. Crockett? This is my courtroom. That'll be another $1,000 fine, by the way, for boring the court." Crockett replied with a slight, dangerous smile, "Your Honor, at this rate, my defense is going to single-handedly fund this courtroom's new coffee machine." A ripple of genuine laughter went through the room. His weapon was humiliation, but it wasn't working. She waited, patiently, because she had an ace up her sleeve. The third day began with Grayson smirking, but this time, Jasmine started with a declaration. "I have evidence," she said, her voice commanding. "It's not evidence for my defense against Ms. Goldberg, it's evidence against the judge himself." The entire courtroom froze. Crockett produced a small digital audio recorder, a secret recording from a pretrial exchange where Judge Grayson was heard bragging to a colleague. On the recording, his voice was clear. "This Crockett woman thinks her little speeches matter? Please, I'll make sure she's a footnote by Friday. Whoopi's team will walk all over her. Crockett never wins a day in my courtroom. I'll see to it personally." Room exploded. Crockett formally moved for Grayson's recusal. The higher court reviewed the tape, and for the first time, Edward Grayson's arrogance cost him everything. The motion was granted. He was gone. Out went Judge I Gargle with Vinegar Grayson, and in walked Judge Margaret Ellis, a woman known for her fairness. The courtroom's energy shifted. It was like swapping a rabid chihuahua for a wise old golden retriever. For the first time, Jasmine Crockett smiled. The real fight was about to begin. With Judge Ellis presiding, the entire dynamic changed. Goldberg's legal team, so confident under Grayson, suddenly seemed lost. Their objections were timid, their arguments flimsy. They had been playing with a stacked deck, and someone had just handed them a fair one. They didn't know how to play. Crockett, now unmuted, was masterful. She brought up the Nielsen metrics. She presented affidavits from advertisers. Then came her cross-examination of Whoopi Goldberg's publicist. She asked, "Sir, you testified that my comments caused irreparable harm. Is that correct?" The publicist replied, "Absolutely. The damage was incalculable." Crockett continued, "Incalculable, I see, so was her show The View cancelled." The publicist admitted, "Well, no." Crockett pressed, "Did she lose any major endorsement deals, movie contracts?" He answered, "There was a slight dip in social media sentiment for about 48 hours. Crockett leaned in, "A slight dip. So the catastrophic, irreparable harm was a few mean tweets. Sir, my teenage nephew gets more heat than that for his TikTok dances. Are you seriously asking this jury for $10 million for mean tweets?" The publicist had no answer. By the time closing arguments ended, the writing was on the wall. Judge Ellis delivered the ruling herself, crisp and final. Case dismissed. The room erupted. But Crockett didn't stop there. She launched a national initiative to hold judges accountable. Her campaign spread and states adopted new judicial oversight commissions. They called them the Crockett Protocols, which, let's be honest, sounds way cooler than the Don't Be a Jerk Judge Act of 2025. A lawsuit designed to silence her voice ended up amplifying it. A biased judge handed her the weapon to reform the very system he abused. And now, his name will be forgotten. Rumor has it he's now presiding over small claims court, deciding disputes over stolen lawn gnomes. A fitting end. Her name won't be. The story that began as Whoopi Goldberg versus Jasmine Crockett ended as a lesson in resilience. As cameras captured her walking out of that courthouse, head high, it was clear her response hadn't just amazed the courtroom. It had changed the system. This is State of Lies, where truth and power collide in the courtroom. And if you thought this trial was wild, wait until you hear what happens when a parrot is called to the witness stand. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.